feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank. We come to you virtually from Seattle and the entire great PNW. We've had some nice weather here now, so it's perfect time of year in the Pacific Northwest. Listen, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, this right here, it's the podcast for you. It's where we say street smarts and book smarts collide. Hello again, everyone. I'm Dan Whedon, and I'm joined today by my co-host, the incomparable Michelle Baumberger. Our guest today is Erica Barnhart. Erica is a communication expert. She's a speaker, and she's a professor on a mission to change workplaces and the world one word at a time. She's an associate teaching professor at the University of Washington and founder and CEO of Claxon Communication, a company that teaches purpose-centered clients how to communicate with clarity and confidence so they increase awareness, revenue, and impact. She is also the author of Pitchfalls, Why Bad Pitches Happen to Good People. I want to hear more about that. And she's the creator of Wordifier, which is a free online tool that helps nonprofits amplify their words. Erica, welcome. We'll be with you in just a minute. Everyone, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and YouTube. We're all over the place. We are ubiquitous. We come to you from about a dozen cities, including the mothership in Atlanta. Now, before we bring on Erica, hello, Michelle. It seems like it's been an eternity since I've seen you.
It does seem that way. And I think we have a couple back to back and then another eternity until the next one. So my schedule has forced us to make some adjustments.
It feels like a fantasy football snake draft. I get you back to back weeks. So it's like I get two Michelles right in a row. So that's great. That's fine. You know, it's funny. I as I was reading the bio for Erica, it made her Wordifier made me think of Wordle. I'm up to a streak of 49. If I run into trouble, I may have to ask Erica. Maybe she can help me with my Wordle, because I'm on a quest to break my record. But listen, you mentioned it's been a while. You've been on vacation, I think, haven't you? Did you have a good time?
Yeah, I've had about 3 different trips back to back, some personal, some related to Entrepreneurs Organization, but literally around the world. So yes, it was amazing. If you haven't done Safari, highly, highly, highly recommend Safari.
Say that again. I missed it.
Safari.
You went on, I think I saw the pictures of your Safari on Facebook.
Yes, it was beautiful.
Okay, I got to ask, what is the coolest animal you saw on Safari?
I would say experience more than animal. I mean, one of the things that's so impactful is you have a tracker who can, they're looking for different, paw prints, movement in the grass. And we saw a leopard and its cub with its kill. And then the next morning we went back and the kill had been moved up into the tree. And so they knew exactly how this was all going to happen. And that experience of seeing that real life progression, the hyenas are underneath, hoping something will drop down for them. It was really, really impressive. I mean, the leopards are impressive, but the story is even more so. Okay,
so I'm going to bore you with something. I'm apologizing to Erica because it's taken a second. You mentioned hyenas. Hyenas was on my crossword the other day, speaking of games, because they are the most carnivorous animal. Apparently, I didn't know that. Hyenas are it. So they're just waiting around for all the other animals to drop their food. Kind of like my dog does when my grandchildren are around. Now, there's a hidden cost to having you not here, though. And the hidden cost was we didn't have a show last week. We normally don't do it on the 5th week, so we just did a little scooching around, but we did have a hidden cost. I suppose that many of your clients and you have hidden costs in our business every day, don't we?
Absolutely. Anytime you're making a decision about, point A, point B, choice A, choice B, there's a cost, but weighed against the opportunity, right? So being gone creates an opportunity for other people to step in, but also, thinking through what is that balance and making sure that makes sense for the situation.
Yeah. And business owners are always looking at hidden costs. And I would think $12,506 per employee would be a large hidden cost, especially if you have a bunch of employees. Would you agree?
Holy cow, yes.
So we got to ask Erica. I'm going to bring you in now, Erica. Finally, thank you for being patient as you're sitting there listening to us go back and forth. But $12,506 is kind of an exact amount. Can you share with us, first of all, welcome, and can you share with us why $12,506 per employee is important in your world?
Thanks for having me on the show. It was great to listen to the banter about hyenas and other things. Didn't know that about hyenas. It's kind of super gross and fascinating all at the same time. So $12,506 comes out of some recent research into how much are companies losing due to lost time and productivity because of ineffective written communication. So I think it's really important to note that this bit of research only looked at written communication. So you have to imagine that number is actually higher. I can't say by how much, but in fact, it's higher. And so the calculation is number of hours lost per week. And then you calculate that times the average salary, and that gets you to the $12,506. So that number is, the higher up you go in terms of salary, the higher that number is.
Well, it's funny. We actually had a speaker in our office yesterday talking about communication for leadership and some of the ways to set people up for success. And that was a lot more focused on verbal communication, but talked about the different channels. And it seems like this is coming up a lot. I saw an HBR article on it recently. So tell me a little about how this looks in your world. What are the kinds of projects you're taking on, the kinds of customers that you're talking to? Because it's fascinating that this sphere is one, incredibly impactful based on those numbers, but also seems to be percolating in the world right now.
Yeah, it's funny to me, of course, because I've been thinking about communication for 20 plus years professionally. So now it makes me giggle that all of a sudden it's like, you know what? It's a key leadership skill, communication. I'm like, welcome to the party. But having said that, it is really important. And it fascinates me how much it's been overlooked because of how pervasive it is. So how it looks in my world and the way I sort of approach communication is that it's through the framework of communicate for good. And in that framework, if you communicate for good, you're communicating for the good of yourself, your team, the organization or company, and by extension, the world. So if you do those first three things well, then by definition, you're going to make the world a better place. So I'm always looking at what's the interplay between these and what's the friction points. So when I work with clients, usually they are at a place of frustration. And what's interesting is sometimes they can pinpoint the frustration, but often they can't. Or they come to me with a presenting problem, and then the work is to figure out what's the underlying problem, right? So let me just distinguish that, like presenting problem is, so I've always like kind of been a runner athlete type person. So I go to the physical therapist and I'm like, my knee real hurts. That's my presenting problem. When in fact, turns out my knee issues are because of, like a tight lower back. And anyone who's probably ever been to PT has also heard hamstrings and glutes not strong enough. Okay, so that's the actual issue. But the presenting thing, the thing that gets me into PT is my knee hurts. This happens with me all the time. Michelle, I imagine you have this as well from a legal perspective. So they may come and say, gosh, my team just, like our productivity isn't where it used to be. So I want to increase productivity. Now I'm always going to have, I want to name the productivity, like why we're obsessed with it. And it's a little bit antiquated as actually a concept, which we could come back to. But what's underneath that, right? So my question is going to be like, well, why is that a business concern? Is that a bottom line business concern? Is this about morale? Is it about retention? So just kind of unpacking it as we go. And once we kind of get there, then I can, figure out with my client, okay, so what's the highest leverage place in this communicate for good framework for us to be focusing? So, and often, increasingly, I would say, we're going to start with the leader. We're going to start with the leader. So it's more comfortable. No, it's more comfortable to do the work at the team and the organizational level that can be a bit more removed. Often what I'm seeing is as with many things, it starts with self in an organizational context. It starts with the leader or the leaders.
So I've got, one of the things that just popped into my head as you were talking is I just wonder, and I'd like to get your comments on this. Have we as humans in communicating with each other just gotten lazy because of technology? And I look back over having been, started my first job in 1987, or my first real job in 1987, when email wasn't even close to having been used. And it felt like you had to work a little bit harder when you corresponded with email, with text, with video chat, with everything. It feels like it's easier. And I just wonder if we have become lazier in how much effort is put into what we're actually saying. Am I making sense?
You're making sense. I don't agree.
Okay, talk to me.
I don't come across very many lazy communicators. And maybe that's just the way that and where I walk through the world. I come across people who really want to be communicating effectively. I actually think the issue is the proliferation of ways in which you can communicate. And not having, and not, I'm going to say, let me back up and say, and companies not investing in communication fluency. Right. And so because we start communicating so young and we're taught to communicate in specific ways, we're sort of like, well, we all know how to do that. We've been doing that since we were 2, 3, 4, whenever that started for you. That doesn't mean that we know how to communicate effectively in an organizational context. And it doesn't mean, and this is where things get really tricky and why I really advocate for investing in your leaders' ability to communicate, because by definition, their words are amplified. And so the ripple effect is fast and furious, right? And so start there, not to the exclusion of other levels of positional authority, like not to the exclusion of your team. I am talking about a starting point, not necessarily an end point. But no, I don't. And it's funny, there's this debate, it's sort of a generational debate where, those of us of the older generation at this point, myself, are like, well, I look at I have 2 teenagers, they text me things. I'm like, there's no punctuation here. That's THEIR, not THEY, apostrophe RE, like these, I get, a little caught up. And it's easy to extrapolate to laziness. I actually think there's an efficiency play in that their worlds and what they need to be proficient in are different. Having said that, I do hope that we will start to appreciate that type of communication doesn't necessarily translate into an organizational context. And so just sort of an awareness of how many channels someone has to be fluent. I use the term fluency because to me, that means you understand the difference between verbal communication, informal verbal communication, formal verbal communication, what I call stand and deliver, like a keynote or a big speech, right? Those are all different. And then there's the written communication and how do I show up on Slack and Teams versus text versus an email or a memo or whatever the other things are. So, and that's a lot. It's just that is a lot of fluency to gain.
That's fascinating because within our firm, we have, our, leadership, formal, attorney trained folks. Mm-hmm. And then we have legal interns, college interns, and high school interns. And so when you talk about this generational element, I think it's fascinating to kind of help them to understand some of that when they're only coming from a high school background, right? It's a very different perspective. They've never necessarily been in a working environment like that. But you also teach college students as well at UW. So I'm curious as to what experience you're seeing in kind of that pre-professional potentially world as they're choosing communications as a course and what perspective they're bringing to the table.
So I teach undergraduate students, but I've spent a lot more time teaching graduate students, and now I'm the faculty director for our executive MP program. So I teach in the Evans School of Public Policy and Governance. That means we think deep thoughts about how to make the world a better place through great big context, policy, but also nonprofits, public sector leadership. So I end up having the great privilege to spend a lot of time with master's students who have said, and executives who have said, I want to use my leadership, my analytical abilities very explicitly and intentionally to make the world a better place. The undergraduate students that I get to work with, I mean, they're pure joy. That's not to say that my master's students aren't, but like there is, we were just talking about this in a faculty meeting, like there's just, especially like the type of student that is drawn to the Evans School as an undergrad, there's like an effervescence and like a deep-seated belief that we can solve these big, gnarly, pressing issues. Whereas at the master's and definitely the executive level, there's more lived experience, and with that can come both knowledge and wisdom, but also some skepticism about what's possible. So how does this show up in communication? And let me be clear, I teach one course called Marketing for Social Impact, but in general, we're gonna sort of sidestep into communication. So I'm not teaching courses on communication. I'm teaching you how to think about communication, because it's me and that's my discipline, as it relates to nonprofits, philanthropy, social innovation, policy, right? So it's a skill set, as opposed to, you know, somebody just wanting to learn about communication. It's contextualized communication. Here's what I noticed, that the way that we are still teaching in K through 12 is very antiquated. It is not keeping up with what is needed, not just in college and graduate school, but like in the application of addressing these issues. Like, and I'll give the most basic example is that we are taught to bury the lead, right? So it's like, I have a thesis, I have now like substantiated the thesis, and here are my conclusions. Well, no one's waiting around for your conclusions, right? So just even flipping, like, what's the lead? And then substantiate how you got there, right? So it's sort of little things like that and bigger things. I feel like I am starting to notice, and this really depends on access to education. I just also want to name that, like I'm speaking in grand generalizations, and different people have access to different educational settings based on race and socioeconomic status. So I just really want to explicitly name that. I would say across the board, grammar, not awesome. And not awesome. No, apparently we're not teaching about commas anymore, much. Okay. But why does that matter? Right? Why does that matter? And this depends on what context you find yourself. In some communities, like that doesn't matter as much. Right? But if you're working in a white dominant community, white dominant organization, white dominant field, this still matters. And so there's a decision moment where if you want to succeed in that environment, that's a skill that you're going to want to master or learn. So
fascinating.
Yeah, I love this conversation. In fact, what I love about this podcast is we often roll into conversation. I had no idea we are going to talk about this discussion, and it's just it's great, and I can't wait to talk a little bit more about it. But first, we're going to have to pay the bills. We're going to take a short break to hear from today's spotlight sponsor, and when we come back with our guest Erica Barnhart for our Hot or Not section of the show, we're going to find out what she thinks about artificial intelligence. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank. The power of law is often used against those who don't know what they don't know, but not anymore. Equinox levels the field for entrepreneurs. Just as your business may now tap into a managed service provider for accounting, HR, or IT help, you can now tap into the power of law with Equinox. Equinox's strategic legal counsel service gives your business the same strategic law advantages as the megacorps. But unlike the mega attorneys, Equinox brings a balance of strategic, business, and practical legal guidance. You set the priorities in the budget. The Equinox team builds a personalized plan at a fixed monthly cost to best serve your legal priorities and needs. Take on the business complexities with the power of law on your team. Visit equinoxbusinesslaw.com and schedule a complimentary no obligation evaluation to see where your business stands. Level the playing field with Equinox Strategic Legal Counsel.
Well, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Michelle Bomberger, here with Dan Whedon, and our guest today is Erica Barnhart. We're going to kick off our next segment, Hot or Not. Are you ready?
Well, I'm ready. I don't know about Erica, but I am certainly ready. Erica, as you know, Hot or Not is where Michelle and I pepper you with questions about business, about life, maybe about grammar, and helping me with my Wordle. Although I did get it at number 49 today, so I'm good to go. And I'm also a grammar nut. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and I'm not alone. So listen, it doesn't seem like very long ago that ChatGPT came into my world for the first time, and now it feels like it's exploded, and I'm actually using it quite a bit. My question is, as I'm reading through news and schools are worried about ChatGPT, and teachers are, and heck, maybe even in the business world. Hot or not, using AI to communicate your message?
Hot.
Talk
there's
about it.
nothing hotter right now than AI.
Nothing hotter. Talk about it.
It's just, it reminds me a lot of back in the day when I worked for an organization called NPower, where we were putting technology know-how into the hands of nonprofits. This meant we were building a lot of websites. So the internet was with us. And then came the moment where you could accept donations online. And, from an educational standpoint, this is so similar to when the internet came around, right? And there was this, let me finish that. Like the donate button was it's kind of funny because there was actually, it was like, oh, now that we can accept donations, they will come rolling in. That's of course not how that works. And we know that now, but it really was this like, there was such hope that just having the technology, but really that was giving away a lot of power, right? I mean, if we're being honest, it was sort of this like, oh my gosh, maybe this is going to be the thing that turns the tide, but it's humans, right? It was the human element behind it. And that is exactly the same as with AI. So there is great concern, and rightfully so, that AI is going to sort of be cataclysmic. And if we let it, it might be, but ignoring it is not going to be a path to making it a force for good. I think leaders who are not prioritizing this for their own learning, for that of their team, for the company, within, 6 months, this is going to happen so fast. The internet felt kind of fast at the time. This is moving so quickly. And you can feel it. Like if it's on your radar, all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, every day, apparently there are 12 articles and podcasts and things that I need to listen to keep up. So I don't know that we all have to keep up that much, but certainly getting really clear on, okay, where are we at today? What are the applications? Do I want to use this for automation or augmentation? Like what makes sense for my company, for my business? And those are business, those are leadership decisions. So yeah, and from a communication perspective, one, you can just have a lot of fun with it. Like you can do all sorts of things. And I am firmly in the camp of it is never going to replace human interaction. And we're also like forgetting that it is humans writing the prompts. It is humans creating the things that are going into ChatGPT or, whatever generative AI tool you happen to be using. So we were very much still involved, and that feels similar. It's sort of like this, well, the machines are taking over. Like, well, if you let them take over, they might take over, but how about we don't let them take over as an alternative? Yeah.
Good perspective. It is everywhere. It is amazing how quickly it is everywhere.
But guess what? It's been everywhere for a long time.
Right. It's
we
visible
just
everywhere.
Didn't have access to it in the same way.
It's not as new as it appears.
Yeah.
So, okay, hot or not, text for business.
Text?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that would depend entirely on what success looks like and who your target audience is. So I'm pretty draconian about working what I call the Claxon method, which is you always start with what does success look like, what results do you want to achieve, what outcomes do you want to achieve, and then who's the target audience. And then based on that, you can make strategic decisions about text, email, print, newsletters, podcasts, whatever the thing is going to be. Those are all hows. But if you jump right to text, you actually aren't making a strategic decision.
Love it.
So It depends.
I like that answer. Here's one I want to find out a little bit more about from you. Hot or not podcasting?
My answer is exactly the same. What does success look like? Who's your target audience?
Well, I think what I was trying to lead into was you podcasting.
I do.
And is your podcast hot? So maybe that I probably didn't do a very good job of teeing that one up, but I wanted to see what you thought about podcasting for your business and your clients and all of that. So tell us a little bit about, I'm going to assume you think that's hot. Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
It is being hot for my audience, my target audience, right? So I have a podcast, Communicate for Good, which I've had for about 3 years. What success looked like was that leaders who wanted to make the world a better place had like a go-to resource that was pretty, wide ranging, right? Communication writ large, because I didn't see that anywhere. But very importantly, in terms of my biz dev sales cycle, sometimes it's a door opener, but I would say more often it's a deal closer, right? So somebody comes across the podcast or me or whatever, and then it's a substantiates me as a thought leader, which builds trust. So we advance in the conversation. I never expected it to be a massive acquisition tool. I don't know that it's a great, it depends on your podcast, but what I'm seeing is it is more effective in terms of cultivation as opposed to acquisition.
Great. So hot or not, careers in public interest and nonprofit sectors?
I'm always going to say hot.
What are you seeing as far as trends?
Well, let's go back to AI. I mean, a year from now, I think I'll probably be answering this question a little bit differently. I am seeing a bit of fatigue. A bit is probably an understatement. These are tough environments to work in. I mean, the margins have always been thin. They're definitely thin, if not thinner than they were in some ways pre-COVID. There's massive burnout, really massive burnout in the nonprofit sector, and of course in our frontline workers and in the public sector. So much is being demanded with so few resources really sustainably invested. So I think it, and yet I'm cycling through all of my students in my mind, and they're all very, very dedicated to that, right? I think part of what has happened, if we sort of, telescope back a little bit, is more of a kind of 20-year trend, where it used to be, to a certain extent, there was sort of a bright line, and nonprofits were the ones making the world a better place, and for-profits were making money, and the two really didn't meet, which in the United States goes back to our Puritan roots. Okay, so maybe we're talking about like a 300-year trend or more. Now that's just not true. Nonprofits are always going to be making the world a better place. That's never going to go away. But with the advent of corporate social responsibility, ESG, all of these things, I think, and on the demand side, so that's the supply side. On the demand side, we see demand from the younger generations, kind of an intolerance for, like, if you're a corporation that doesn't care about this at all in any way, I'm not interested. That doesn't align with my values. So there's a forcing function from the younger generations on the demand side. So therefore the supply is, meeting demand. So it's a bit, I think how we define, it's like public interest and impact, public impact is definitely shifting. So there's a definitional shift in that. We're always going to be looking for fundraisers. That's what I'm here to tell you. If you really want to land a job in the nonprofit sector, we're always going to need fundraisers for sure.
So I want to try to get one quick question in before we take our next break, and it's this. I'm always curious, Erica, how people got to where they are today. Coming out of high school, maybe college, what was your path into teaching communication, whether it be to college students or to leaders, and getting to hear what was your journey and why? What drew you to it?
So because I know we're going to go to commercial break, I will keep this short, but actually my interest in language started when I was 8 and I moved from Canada to the United States. And I had been in a French immersion program, so I couldn't read or write very well in English. I could really only read and write in French because that's where we were at in the curriculum. And so over the summer, I had to really up my game. And then it was just it was so stark, right? I could feel how I was not going to be able to create connection and be successful if I didn't like get on this really quickly. So that's really the like genesis of it. And then growing up, everyone, including me, thought I'd be a lawyer. Michelle and I talked about this. I mean, if you go back, I think most people are like, clearly she's gonna be a lawyer. And then I was a paralegal, no offense, Michelle. And I was like, ooh, I don't know, lawyer. I don't know about that. And then I was sort of like, what am I going to do next? And honestly, it was a series of just sort of happenstance invitations to, I was the associate director of commerce undergraduate programs at the University of British Columbia. So I did a lot of advising. So kind of in that higher ed space. And then, I was in-house with the nonprofit doing communication development. And then I got asked by the University of Washington to start teaching. And I've just taught in all sorts of different capacities. I taught at Seattle U for a period of time, their Masters of Nonprofit Leadership, which was also just a total honor for a long time. And then I've guest lectured at the University of Chicago a number of times over the years. So I wasn't like, I'm called to teach. It was more like, want to teach? And I'm like, of course, great. That sounds good.
Well, I know that what we want to do next is take our second and last commercial break. We're going to take that short break to hear from our sponsors. And when we come back with our guest, Erica Barnhart, for our famous Plead the Fifth section of the show, we're going to find out if she does any binge watching. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank. And Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors, Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, BC Fitness Studio, Port Ludlow Resort, and Upstart Group. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
Well, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm co-host Michelle Baumberger, and our guest today is Erica Barnhart of Claxon Communications. We're going to start our next segment, Plead the Fifth.
And you don't get to use Michelle as an out. In fact, she might be an adversary in this case today, Erica. So okay. Plead the Fifth is where we're going to pepper you with more questions. We might turn up the heat a little bit. We'll see if you plead the fifth, but if you do, you can only do it once. And then I think the gloves come off. So this one might be a little bit of a fun one. I just got done, my wife and I, Barb, just got done binge watching The Diplomat on Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
And now we're into Silo, although we have to wait till once a week to come up, but we're into Silo now. I always like to find out, first of all, you may or may not be a television watcher, but if you are, Plead the Fifth. What's your most recent binge watch?
The Diplomat.
Oh, you watch that too? Okay.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. Oh, actually, not accurate because last night I finished Citadel.
Oh, we just start. Oh, we might have to have a whole nother episode because we are on episode, I think, 3 of the Citadel. So there you go.
I'm not going to ruin that, but it's good.
Yeah, no, we're I think we're on episode 3. We just started that, and so. Well, let me ask this. Just from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I like television as a way to relax. I always have. Talk a little bit about life balance and making sure that from a professional standpoint that how important is life balance to leaders and to you?
I struggle with the idea of balance. I really dislike the term work-life balance because it implies that work is separate from life. So I've struggled with that for a long time. I like the idea of integration and, integrate and being really like to staying as embodied as you can in the present moment, in the present day, in the present week, all of these things, which is very hard to do, by the way. So yeah, I watch some TV, but not all the time. I joke that I'm like a middle-aged white woman cliche. I journal and I meditate, and I've always loved working out. So I work out a lot. I walk a lot. I'm super intentional about connection with my friends. I have a lot of that built in, and it's one, I adore them. And also it's because of how important connection is. So do we ever, I don't know. I don't know that I don't know very many people who are like, I did it. I achieved balance. I mean, by definition, balance is fleeting, right? Because then something else comes along. But do I believe in taking exquisite care of yourself? Absolutely.
Good mindset, I think, to balance all of the things that you are doing in your life.
And to really know, can I just say one more thing on this? I'm very passionate about the topic of self-care and all of that. I think, like, really figure out what feels loving for you. Like truly, because there's so much out there, and then my list is kind of a cliche list. And having said that, for some folks, like, none of that's going to sound good. And I just did a podcast episode a few back where, it was there was like a hit parade of things, of self-care ideas. And I just really want to say, like, trust yourself. One of the downsides of the advent of access to information is, I think it is eroding self-trust. And so I would just love folks to be like, no, I know what's good for me, and I know what's not good for me. But, like, it's a very personal choice. So I just.
Well, and as a segue from that, and the fact that you are kind of the word lady, how do you react to the word impossible?
I've never been asked that before. I love that. I think it's a matter of what you want and what you don't want. Right? So are there certain structural things in place that make it impossible? Absolutely. And I think, like, I can't answer this question without acknowledging that structural racism makes a lot of things impossible for a lot of people. Right? So what is possible for me as a woman who walks through the world with a lot of privilege because of the color of my skin, a lot of unearned privilege, some earned, but a lot, right? It is just because this is what I look like. What is impossible for me is because of lived experience and positionality and privilege. And then from there, I want to say there's a big piece about personal choice, but that is within constructs that are not that are very fixed for very many people.
Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate it.
So my plead the fifth is kind of just really a follow-up question to something that you spoke really eloquently on and caught my attention about K through 12. And you said, to paraphrase, you said something that we're making mistakes at the K through 12 level as we're teaching kids, young people, how to communicate. Plead the fifth. How would you fix that? If you had a magic wand, what is it that can be done to change and fix that problem?
Give more money to our public school systems. I mean, yeah. That's my simple, somewhat trite answer, but we are asking the impossible of our public school systems at this point. And so to think that they could, simultaneously serve as institutions for education and also social service agencies. On top of that, to even, do a true, burn it to the ground and build it back up. There just simply aren't the resources to do it. And I also want to give a shout out to every single public school teacher out there, and private school teachers as well. But I have one kid who's done private and the other public. I'm a public school kid. There are definitely differences. So my comments on K through 12, I never want those to be construed as a critique of the incredible work being done by teachers in our K through 12 public schools.
So let me do, and I agree with you as a former school board member. I agree with you on that. Let me ask this, so from a logistics standpoint, let's say they had more money. Is there something that just from the classroom, just from that standpoint, what could we be doing better? And maybe as parents, as raising kids, where can we all improve on teaching youth how to better communicate?
I would say very intentionally doing short format, like you have 15 seconds, you doing it, you have 30 seconds, you have 5 minutes. What are the differences in terms of what you would communicate and how? Here's your audience. So that that ability to calibrate for the vast array of mediums. And our kids, of course, are like, they're fluent on social media. They do not need to be skilled up in that department. But can we, so then there's a generational piece, right? So practically speaking, rather than sort of, and I'm not, these are gross generalizations. I certainly know of teachers who are like, let's just take it for granted, sort of like AI. Let's take it for granted that, students are using AI. Okay, what does that mean? Ditto for social media. They're already using social media. How can I build on that strength and, bridge it over into what will serve them as they go up and, out into the world? I feel like we still do a lot of like social media waving of the hand, like it's, a lesser form of communicating. It's just a different form of communicating. It's not a lesser.
I'm going to wrap us up with one of Dan's favorite questions. So if you could build a business out of a hobby of yours, what would that business be?
Salad dressings. Just totally true. You can ask my friends.
Michelle, I'm just going to say this. I don't know that I've ever heard a guest so quickly respond to that question with something so unexpected. I'll just say that.
So what is your favorite salad dressing? What would be the signature Erica salad dressing?
I'm fickle because it kind of goes in waves. Like I get on a kick of like, here's a type of salad dressing. How can we make it the most awesome version? So Green Goddess, I was on a big kick for a while, but now I'm really into a shallot dressing, like, shallots and mustard. And then just the other night, I made a dinner and I added a little bit of honey. That was a great addition. Hadn't done that before. To me, it's so creative, right? So I'm just immersed in my brain and words and whatnot throughout pretty much every day. And I love cooking. I love the sort of challenge and creativity in cooking really yummy, healthy meals. And yeah, I've always loved making salad dressing.
Fantastic.
But I won't turn it into a business because then I think it might kill the joy. Maybe. I don't know. Never say never. I do love making salad dressing.
Never say never. Agreed. So, Erica, thanks so much for being a guest here on the Shrimp Tank today. For our listeners that want to get in touch with you or learn more about your business or your teaching, how can they get more information?
The Communicate for Good podcast. You can find it kind of anywhere you like to consume podcasts. The website, claxon-communication.com. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I think that's the best way to really get a holistic picture of the work I do, both in terms of teaching and also coaching and consulting and speaking. So the wide world of Erica is probably most accessible actually on LinkedIn.
Yeah, check out Erica on LinkedIn. There's tons of great content. And make sure you check out all the replays of the Shrimp Tank podcast at our website, shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle. And wherever you get your podcast, as Dan said, we are ubiquitous: Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, and many other platforms. Follow us also on our show's social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Erica, thank you for being here. We both appreciate it. And I just realized I should have asked you what you thought about my word ubiquitous, which I ubiquitously use every single week on the show. I should have gotten your take on that. Let me just ask, do you like the word?
Does it resonate with your listeners?
I don't know. It resonates with me. So I don't know. I'll have to ask the listeners and find out. But I like it. So there we go.
Distinctive. So I like that it's distinctive. My question would be, does it resonate with your listeners?
You know what? Michelle, I think I'm going to have to go out and ask people because I don't know, but I think I'm going to have to find that out.
Poll.
But anyway, what you did today resonated with everybody, I'm sure. Thank you, Erica, for that. Michelle, as always, great to see you. And guess what? We turn around and get to see you again next week. Our next show will be Wednesday, June 7th. Our guest will be Lizzie Mintus. Did I say that correctly? Michelle, good. So. Lizzie Mintus. I just found out from Here's Waldo Recruiting. I love that name. Can't wait to see her and you next week. Everybody else in the meantime, please Be safe, be well, and be prosperous, because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.